Hello, Internet. I'm Chris Reynolds, developer advocate here at Pantheon, and today on the live stream, we're going to be talking about Pantheon Content Publisher, which recently entered its public preview phase last week in San Diego. I've got with me on the stream senior sales engineer Kevin Basarab to share his experience with Content Publisher from a Drupal perspective. I'll be talking about Content Publisher from a WordPress perspective. Welcome to the live stream, Kevin.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to talk about Content Publisher.
Yeah, and for those of us who don't know you as well, why don't you tell us the stream, everyone who might be watching now or in the future, about yourself and how you discovered Pantheon?
Of course. So I've been working in the Drupal industry for over 20 years now. Started actually in the newspaper business, doing content editorial experiences, actually creating those experiences in like the Drupal 4.6, 4.7, 5 days. And then got my experience working with Pantheon, working at an agency for the past 10 plus years. So I've kind of got to see Pantheon grow from a client perspective and a customer perspective. And now here joining the team and excited to see the growth and the excitement around Content Publisher coming out.
Yeah, and for my own experience, the story that I've been telling over and over for the last month or so has been when I worked in agency space in WordPress development agencies. I have very vivid and specific memories of building something super like bespoke and super cool in the WordPress admin with Gutenberg, and then working with content teams who like have been using Google Docs for forever, and their whole
Mhm.
workflow is copying and pasting Google Docs, um, and because there's a lot of things you can do there, right? Like
Mhm.
there's a lot of reasons to do that, but like we're begging and pleading for them to please use the thing that we built for you, and like use the WordPress admin because that's where the stuff lives. I imagine the same sort of thing is true for you.
Exactly. You build out a beautiful experience. You think you hear everything that the client needs, the users need, and then next thing you know, first site goes live. We've got copy paste errors. We've got issues with permissions. We've got things coming up, and what all the work that we did is going behind the scenes now. And really, in the end, people just want to work in what they're used to working in.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and like that's sort of like the story. Like I'm going to be going to Bad Camp this week, and the story that I'm bringing over there is that like you don't have to do these things, and that you can use the tools that you're already used to, and that's a pretty. I don't know. It may not be everything. There's still going to be cases when I'm going to want to use the
Mhm.
page builder like Elementor or Gutenberg or whatever. But for things where I don't need that, or things where like a really good example is like a university website where you just want the faculty to be able to edit their own bios. You don't want
Mhm.
to send it to the web team or something. That's something that I think that we can do, and they just do that stuff in Google Docs or in the future other things as well. So that's what we're talking about. Um, yeah, do you,
No, that makes
yeah,
total sense. That's where you got to make the tools for the user and what's happening there. When we're building a site, whether it be WordPress, Drupal, or any CMS, you're making an editorial experience for the content there. You can't fit everything into one box, and combining where those come together. If you're doing lots of plain text, Google Docs makes a ton of sense for that. If you're
yeah,
doing a lot of component-based work, now we might need Elementor or Gutenberg or something else to
yeah.
build those different experiences, but those don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah, and like there's like I said, there's a lot of really good reasons. There's user governance, there's user ownership, there's like permissions, there's comments, there's
Hmm.
suggestions, all these things that Google has been working on for, forever, that WordPress has been trying to do simultaneous like live editing for the last 3, 4-ish years. And like I mean, I don't know how much closer we are. Like I keep hearing about it every once in a while. It goes in cycles, but like it's not there yet. Like we don't
Hmm.
it's not in the editor yet, and there are other things that do exist. But that's a lot of talking. Let's start showing some things. I've got a WordPress site here. This is a site that I spun up on WordPress. It is just really to republish HP Lovecraft stories. And I can do that. I've got like Lovecraft's listing over here on Gutenberg.org, no relation to the WordPress editor. And what I can do is just take one of these stories and drop it into a Google Doc, which I'm going to do. So I can just pick this sort of at random. I have an open Google Doc over here that I'm going to copy and paste. And then I'm going to give my document a title. Maybe take that first part out. And then I need to allow Content Publisher to have access to this document, which it's thinking about it. There we go. And this is coming from a app that gets added to your Google Workspace, so that once you have it hooked up, all of your Google stuff can have this little integration here. I'm going to connect it to a collection. In this case, I'm going to connect it to this one, the lovecraft.chrisreynolds.io, which you can go to right now, and it's a live public website on the internet. Follow along. Connect it to that collection, and now I've got some stuff. What I want to do first is I can go directly into a live preview, and it will show me in a minute what this looks like on my actual website. Here's my website, and here's the preview. And it looks like it's there. There's some looks like sort of formatting stuff that we can fix. But what's cool about this, I think it's cool, is that like this is all imaginary. This is in like a weird, like a weird Cthulhu-esque, like null space where it doesn't actually exist. It looks like it exists. It definitely, like I can see it, but like this isn't in WordPress yet. It's getting this content served from the Content Publisher API in the middle. And as such, I can open up the editor over here and I can make some changes. The first thing that I want to do is fix whatever that thing is. I think I can do that by changing the margin right there. Maybe. There we go. That looks right. And then we can see that fixed that right there. So that's cool. I've got a whole bunch of like stuff at the top. I don't know that I need that. In fact, I might not even need this whole title at all because we've got the title down here. And we can just drop that. You can see that the title of the document is already there because it's pulling it from the metadata, which we'll get to in a second. This stuff at the top, I don't know that I need. I'm going to keep this sort of like informational stuff for now. But like that might be something that I might want to look at later. Move all this stuff out of here. Get rid of that, and now I've got my document, and you can see those changes happen as I'm doing it. Let's actually scroll down. I didn't check in advance to see if this had any images. Some of these republishings of Lovecraft actually, because it was published in like Weird Tales or something, has like whatever image. Yeah, there we go. So we do have an image in here, so we can scroll down and see if we can find that. This is compelling video content right here as I scroll. Okay, so what I wanted to show here is one of the problems that I always run into when I'm copying and pasting out of Google Docs is that when I copy and paste and there's images, the images are still hosted on Google, and they're only like permissioned for me as an individual user and consumer of Google to be able to see that image. So if I happen to like publish, it'll look fine to me in the editor, but that image is going to be broken for like everyone else in the world. So what's cool about this is I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm not sure how much you can see it, but it's pointing to cdn.content.pantheon.io. So this lives not in Google. It doesn't live in WordPress either. It lives in a CDN layer in the middle. So it's always going to be at the edge. It's always going to be fresh, and it's importantly not going to disappear when I hit publish. So that's pretty cool. And then if I go all the way to the end, there's if you have looked at the Gutenberg stuff, there's like this big, Gutenberg license at the end. I've made it so that I have a separate page that just has the Gutenberg license. So I don't need all of that extra stuff at the end of my document. So again, I can just go in here and scroll up to the end of the story and delete it. And now I've got my my Lovecraft story. So when I'm ready, well, over here I've got an option. I can share the preview URL. This is also really cool. So this copies the URL of this preview. Again, this doesn't exist in WordPress yet. Copies that URL to the clipboard. So I can open it up in an incognito window, pretend I'm someone else, paste it in, and there it is. So if I was sharing this with someone else, if I had like a review team to like take a look, they can see what it's actually going to look like on the actual website. That's super helpful. And then we can sort of go into full windows, stuff like that. I'm going to go ahead and hit publish, and that's going to open up the content publisher thing. And this is where I can, again, see it previewed, and I can change the title. So this is what is being sent over. I can change the slug, which should correspond with what WordPress uses. And then I can get a description. I can use AI for any of these things if I wanted to. And so AI will generate, a description. It'll generate a slug or a title. I'm just going to pick the first one because I think that one's probably fine. If I wanted to, I can put a featured image here, some tags. We can maybe generate some tags with AI and see what it comes up with. Sure, gothic horror, H.P. Lovecraft, horror fiction, weird tales. Sounds great. And then the other thing is we can put it into a section. So I have a couple things in the no section, but what I really want is it probably should go in a defined section. And this is really just like organizationally where stuff lives. And it's really organizationally where stuff lives inside Content Publisher. It's more a matter of getting stuff organized. It doesn't really correspond with your website architecture or like your Google Docs folder architecture. It's specifically to Content Publisher. So I'm going to save that, save the metadata changes that I made, and then hit the publish button. And this is when it's actually going to push it into WordPress, and I can see it on my site. So there it is, Medusa's coil. And if I go into the dashboard, I will see it is somewhere in here. It's got a little edit in Google Docs link that I can just go directly. From here, I can make it. I'm going to edit that so I can put it underneath the Lovecraft thing. And then if I wanted to, I could add it to my navigation menu in the full site editor and do that sort of stuff. So that's kind of the thing. That's kind of it in a nutshell. I'm gonna pull my screen off, yeah. So you are a Drupalista. I think that is the term. Let's see what it looks like from the Drupal perspective.
Yeah, for sure. So it's going to be a very similar experience from the Drupal perspective. And that's one of the beautiful things about content publishers. We're taking to the tools that we're already working with. So we're used to the Google Docs experience. And that means we can also abstract the workflow to be a similar experience, whether you're in WordPress, whether you're in Drupal, whether you're in a Next.js site, things of that nature. You can come together and look at that. But for our example here today, we want to think about what Chris brought up at the beginning. I work over the years with a lot of higher education sites, lots of universities, and generally, there's always a time where you have faculty biographies or somewhere where you have lots of users on the site that need to do one thing. And when you start giving them that access to do that one thing, now you're having to create user accounts for them in Drupal. You're needing to train them. You're needing to give them access to potentially just that one part of the site, their bios in this example, or they might accidentally get access to lots of other things where they could get in and break something. And an academic shouldn't really need to learn an entirely new system in order just to update their biography.
Mm-hmm.
Why not just get in there, use the system they're already working in. Let's use something that we can actually, we're already making our content syllabi in Google Docs, we're doing our lesson plans, we're already doing other work there. Why not already use what we're using to bring them in and bring that faculty bio up to date? So let's take a little bit of an example and think about what we could do for this for a faculty biographer or a faculty staff member at a school. We're going to take an example here out of the university realm and go to a high school realm and jump into Sherman High School with Mr. Ed Rooney.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone remembers Ed, he's got quite the problem with some truancy and Ferris getting into trouble typically. Oddly enough, in thinking about this, Ben Stein's character has no actual name given to him. So you can't just say, hey, we're going to do a biography for Ben Stein's character. So we're going to level up to the principal and go from there. But we're going to live like we are Ed Rooney today, and we're going to place ourselves in that experience and think about this through his lens. So Mr. Rooney's been in the business a really long time. He's a fan of really the chalkboard versus the internet. So trying to train him new things isn't so good, but he learned a while ago he can really start plotting and seeing what students are up to in Google Docs and keeping notes of what they're going to be doing along the way. So he's already used to using Google Docs. So we can set up for him that collection that Chris showed earlier, create a Google Doc that shows up in his workspace, all prepped and connected to our Drupal site, just by doing the same clicks that you saw Chris do within WordPress. Nothing changes there. And he now has the ability to now start writing a bio for himself. So to save you all from seeing myself act as Mr. Rooney and write a bio on his behalf, we're going to paste in his bio here, some fun Google Gemini generations here of him. And time again, he is able to jump in and just make this bio very, very quickly. And when he does this, he can just as quickly as you saw on WordPress, click the preview button and decide what is he going to look at on this bio. How is this going to look on the website for us? And he sees that looks really nice. Like I didn't have to do anything. He was able to just paste in something like he's used to using and make some updates here. If he wants to, though, he can jump in and show that side-by-side editor. He can start formatting some things differently if he wanted to. He could kind of start layering in different content that he wants to bring up, and that immediately starts showing on the side-by-side editor here for him to look at. So he's pretty excited about this. He likes what he's seeing. He's just going to go ahead and hit that big publish button in the corner and see what happens. He immediately is going to get another preview option as you looked at. And although he doesn't pick up on a lot of the new things, he's been told time and time again from everyone across the university that metadata matters. So he wants to make sure he's adding that metadata in, but he really doesn't want to create that. So he's going to leverage the AI suggestions that we have for the descriptions and the tags to generate that content for us. So just as quickly as clicking that button and selecting our metadata description or our tags, he can choose those and get them in. And just from a governance perspective, if he tries to click publish here, he's going to say, hey, don't forget to save your metadata. We're going to do that, make sure that metadata is saved, and then click publish to get this right out to the web. So within just using his tools he was already familiar with, there was no additional training he had to learn. He was able to generate that content. And just intuitively, by seeing the metadata in the experience before publishing, it reminded him that, hey, this is an important part of working for the web. I need to fill that information out and get that forward. So
Yeah,
now that we've,
and to that point of training, I know Human Made worked with WP Campus a couple months ago to do a study on, the use of WordPress in higher education. And one of the things that came out of that study that was a good point that I learned was that there's a lot of time that goes into training the users, training users on how to use WordPress. And so that is another sort of use case where I can see, particularly in this context, content publishers slotting in and just removing a lot of that necessary training, because you already know how to use. You probably use Google Docs in an academic context. Probably, I mean, a lot of schools do. So you don't need to learn a new thing. You just learn the thing that you already know and connect it to the website.
Yeah, and an experience like a faculty bio here, by setting that collection up beforehand, now it's just showing up in their Google Docs already.
Yeah.
They don't even have to go and create that document. They can go look at it. When he comes back and looks at this, he can jump in here and start making additional edits to it. So say that Mr. Rooney wants to add a quote in or something here, he could select that and we can add that as a web style, which I'm going to come back actually to our Google Doc to show that. This is another feature that Content Publisher has that you didn't show yet, Chris, but it's a way for us to, as users, to enforce brand standards or add some a little bit extra pieces that Google Docs doesn't really handle. don't go overboard with this. You don't want to overwhelm your editors and make a new thing for them to learn, but you can add a couple pieces in here to add some specific styles along the way. So I'm going to add in the pull quote to our quote here. And from there, I can go ahead and preview again, or publish again rather. So I'll go back on screen here, publish this out. And I'm going to see that pull quote come up in our preview window over here on the left-hand side. I got a weird styling bug with it for some reason today, on this time. Always the fun of live demos as we see that go forward. Publish this out and view the content forward. And now I've got that quote showing up along the way. Always with the weird styling. But that's a really quick way to kind of bring together and add what's happening behind the scenes is we're just adding classes, and how you as an administrator can make that happen and bring those forward without your end user having to make any adjustments for it. So all within just a couple clicks, using the tools that Mr. is used to using, he's able now to get his bio updated, doesn't need to bother anyone for it. Your training and your experience with your content publishers generally across the university can focus on the areas that need the custom work versus the parts where we just want to scale it out to a lot of people. I could see this being used a lot of times, not only for faculty, but say we've got students writing blogs, say we've got event publication, things of those natures are great areas where it's an aspect of the website that brings in lots of authors, doesn't need a lot of editing experiences, but really it's a text-based approach. And how can we bring that in and bring the tools to where someone's already working?
Yeah, web styles are a cool thing that I've played with a little bit. That's really neat. There's also smart chips or smart components where you can basically, like, in your application, define sort of a dynamic piece of content, and that aligns with something in the code, so that, like, in Google, you say, yeah, I'm going to insert this dynamic thing and then publish it, and Content Publisher, when it's rendered, knows, oh, that dynamic thing in the Google document means this piece of code, and it renders the code on the other side, which is pretty neat too.
So it'd be really useful for like documents like tables or things of that
Mm-hmm.
nature that has dynamic content coming in. You already have some of that created. I can layer that in and package it just like you would do in a newspaper where we want to add context to a story.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. One use case that I wanted to talk a little bit about. Well, I'll go back to my thing, my screen, because I've got this presentation that I'm bringing to Bad Camp. Actually, I'm going to use the more complicated diagram, um, because I wanted to show this idea of, like, the way that I sort of contextualize Content Publisher is it can be sort of a many to many relationship. Obviously, we're talking primarily about Google Docs right now, but tomorrow it could be Office 365, it could be Notion, it could be Figma, it could be whatever. You could also, like, build out an integration. I mean, it's all an open API, a GraphQL API, so you could build out, like, a Drupal as a or WordPress as a content source. If you did want to put all of your content in that thing, put it into the Content Publisher magic stack in the middle, and then output to something else. So that's one way that you could handle, like, a decoupled or headless site. You have, because you just have the middle layer, that's where all that stuff lives, and it gets translated into, like, markdown, tangential, adjacent stuff. But one of the ways that we are using it and eating our own dog food at Pantheon, in addition to maybe the normal, in quotation, stuff, I know that Samir, our CEO, wrote a blog post that was written in Content Publisher, and that's up on the Pantheon site. And there's a couple other stuff, like posts like that. But in addition to that, sort of, again, normal, in quotations, use case, we are using it, or starting to develop on it, for the Pantheon documentation site. So if you're familiar with the Pantheon documentation site, all of the code lives in GitHub, and it's all markdown files. So anybody can come in and they can make a pull request, or they can see the code that went into it. It's using Gatsby in our old sort of front end sites architectures to do the build. The Gatsby build takes a really long time, which is one of the problems with that. But, like, we feel really strongly that the markdown files for all of our documentations are editable in the open, right? So, but there are times when we get requests from like product owners or product managers internal at Pantheon who primarily work in Google Docs to add something to one of our documents, or for a release note is a really good example where they wrote a release note in a Google Doc and then we have to like transcribe that into Markdown and then publish it. There's a couple cases where I have drafted updates to a document in our doc site in Google Docs and then done the same sort of transcription process and putting it into a pull request because we weren't ready to sort of like put that out there yet. And notably, all of the Content Publisher documentation obviously was written in Google Docs and Content Publisher because, again, we're using the thing that we're talking about. So we have a new version of the documentation site that we're working on, which is it is here. This is the dev site. And what it's doing is it's pulling from both the markdown files in this GitHub repository, which is private at the moment. It's pulling from the GitHub repository. We have the documents, but we also have some content. Specifically, we've got the content publisher content that is all coming through the API from Content Publisher from Google Docs. So all of this stuff is coming from Google Docs, but if I go into something else, like our documentation on Terminus, all of that stuff is coming from the Markdown files, and it's being served on the other end by Next.js. It's a Next.js app. We're using our new like trialing our Next.js implementation here. And so this is an example where there is no CMS attached to it. It's just markdown files in a GitHub repository and Google Docs in Google going through that sort of middle channel right here where the magic happens. And then on the other end, it's going into a Next.js application as well. So it is a thing where it could be used for decoupled sort of applications. I've already seen an integration with React Bricks. We had some folks from React Bricks come onto an internal call and demo Content Publisher inside React Bricks. That was pretty cool. That sort of plays with the idea of like the Google document is like a component in a larger like page build process. Like it's just it's one piece that slots into like a page that is already like a page builder sort of thing, which is kind of neat. So there's all sorts of different ways that you can use Content Publisher and like today, beyond just the direct Drupal to, website, Drupal to Drupal, WordPress, or WordPress to WordPress with like the Content Publisher stuff in the middle.
Yeah, that GraphQL layer gives a lot of power to what this can do. And coming into the preview now and launching this, I'm excited to see how do people start using it? What creative ideas do people have to bring this forward? And the doc site's a perfect example of that. There's so many Next.js React sites out there that are looking for lightweight CMSs, but do they really need the CMS at all if you can just tap into a Google Doc?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, are there, I would love to hear, I know there's a couple people that are watching live, and if anybody has thoughts about this or questions, love to hear you like type your thoughts in the chat. Again, this is out in the open. It's in public preview. You get there's a free tier, and at the free tier you get something like 50 documents that you can publish a month, which I think gets you pretty far. For what I would be personally using it for, or like even in the example of like using it for faculty bios, I don't know that you're publishing more than 50 documents a month. But obviously that scales up to like a higher level tier or an enterprise level for more uses and more users in the admin and stuff and that sort of thing. Everyone gets a free 30-day trial of the enterprise level stuff, so that's cool. So you can try all the things, but if you're not using it, it's automatically just going to scale you down to the free tier, which, as I said, I think you can kind of get pretty far on that. I'll also note that you don't have to be a Pantheon customer to use Content Publisher. Shh. Like my site right here, this site notably, well, Does this? No, this site lives on Pantheon. But I do have a site. I lied. This site lives on Pantheon, but I do have a site that doesn't live on Pantheon that does have Content Publisher added to it, my personal site. So like you don't have to be a Pantheon customer to use Content Publisher. You can use Content Publisher anywhere, which is also sort of a new thing, branching out from like trying to like pull everything in house and doing everything ourselves. Um, I'm curious, Kevin, what sort of things are you most interested or excited? I guess one thing that we didn't talk about too from the Drupal context, and we can talk a little bit about it from here too, is um, one thing that you'll see is that uh, my documents sit alongside my regular pages in WordPress, and these, if I actually go into it, it lives like there is a version of this that was copied over into the WordPress database. That's not the case when we move over into Drupal.
That's correct. Yeah, and Drupal, that actually comes in through a remote entity
Yeah.
structure. So similar to how YouTube works and some of the other remote entities within Drupal. And what that allows us to do within the Drupal space is only store a pointer to the document, the UID, to the GraphQL call, so that we're not storing all this extra data within the Drupal infrastructure. We're actually just making a simple relationship back to GraphQL to say, hey, let's pull that content in.
Hmm.
So that does mean as you bring that content in, we have Solr as a dependency on it, so we can bring any content out through Solr, through views, or mixing that content with other pieces of content, which gives you the benefit then of if you're mix and matching nodes with Pantheon content publisher documents and entities, now you're able to also get the benefit of powering those in views through a Solr query as well, which gives you some other added benefits. It's like
Hmm.
you're searching and some of those different pieces and speed, performance and implications.
Is there from someone who doesn't know Drupal as well, being me, is there like what does a remote entity like sort of mean besides like it's a thing that lives not on this site? Like is there a architectural benefit for putting things in a remote entity versus like bringing it in the way that we do with WordPress?
Yeah, so what you just described within WordPress is you've got now a duplication of data. So now
Yep.
you're sending that data in two different places. There's chances that synchronization going wrong, things of that nature happening. Here, we're just, with a remote entity, we're just bringing in that pointer back to the GraphQL. So we're always able to get the latest and greatest data coming into Drupal from that entity along the way and from that GraphQL call. So we're saving database sizes. We're able to now bring that content in very quickly, but also make quicker speeds. So we don't, if we're doing database moves between servers, we're not having to bring in all this extra node data or all the extra content that comes around with it. If we have lots and lots of content publisher documents that have their stories, like you're describing, they might have a lot of data associated with them. Now that's going to save some of the space and get some performance benefits there along the way.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Um, Yeah. And like that was actually the screen that you're looking at right now is actually the screen
Hmm.
that I wanted to bring up
Yep.
because it's a little bit different inside the Drupal admin. You can see it's got a separate section that is
Hmm.
dedicated to the Pantheon documents that are being pulled in from Google that are separate from other types of content in Drupal.
Yep.
You already mentioned the like integration with Solr. So there's like a separate like you have to index those things and configure it with Solr, and that's a thing that I was digging into last week as I was prepping for Bad Camp. What other things, like what other sort of opportunities or potentials for um, uh, content publisher do you see in a sort of Drupal centric workflow?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's interesting moving ahead is you mentioned earlier the smart components and looking at those different integrations. And those are really based around a React approach and like a Next.js component. So while it isn't here right now, I see a lot of opportunity there as Drupal Canvas comes to life and we're starting to make more experiences and experience builder, that there could be opportunities to pull some of those pieces in to the content publisher experience, leveraging the GraphQL layer and Next.js to bring those together. I think the other part there that's not as specific to Drupal, but we often will see portfolios where they have Drupal sites, they have WordPress sites, and they might have some static
Right.
decoupled sites along the way. So things like legal pages, terms of services, privacy policies, some of those pages that are text legal type bases, you can now store those in a Google Doc and push those out to multiple endpoints at the same time versus having to go into WordPress and update, go into Drupal to update, or write some custom code along the way for each of those.
Yeah, and migrations was a thing that was brought up to me last week as well as an
Hmm.
opportunity for a place where you could use something like this, where like if you've got a ton of content and no matter
Hmm.
where it lives, if it lives in Drupal, if it lives in WordPress, if it lives in some other CMS somewhere, like, and you need to migrate to somewhere else, notably like off of that CMS and onto some other CMS, usually what that means is like some complex like database queries and
Hmm.
whatever to get the migrate to get the content migrated over. But if the content lived in a Google Doc, or if you could
Hmm.
copy it over into a Google Doc, or I mean, there's an API layer. You can pull it out of Drupal or WordPress and put it into a Google Doc, right?
Exactly.
And then it lives there so that when you move into a different CMS or a different platform, then the content is sort of like decoupled from the original site and you can,
Hmm.
again, yeah, push it out to wherever your destination is.
Yeah, you're getting that opportunity. And also, if you don't have the content already in Google Docs, how much nicer an experience is it if you're able to now bring that content into Docs, do some formatting there for your editors to look at it, prep things in advance for the migration versus waiting for the entire new site to be ready. Now we can get ahead of that and start getting the content prepped and ready to go and push that out as the site is prepped and ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, and obviously the story that I use directly and the thing that I am going to be leading my talk off tomorrow about content publisher is that on Pantheon on Pantheon.io, we don't actually manage the content in the content management system that runs our website. We manage the content in something else. Like when I write a blog post for the Pantheon website, I start in a Google Doc and then I write my content. And then I get Steve Persh to take a look at it. And I get Yulia, our content person, to do some, editorial changes. And I might get a subject matter expert like you to come in and say, is this stuff accurate technically?
Hmm.
And when all that stuff is done and I get the comments and there's all the suggestions and whatever, then I'm doing the copy and paste thing into Drupal. And then I have to deal with like all the formatting stuff. I do all of that stuff, and that's a lot of like there's a lot of like empty human labor in the middle of moving that content over from Google Docs into your CMS, that we can just save by like leaving it in the actual thing that does the editing stuff.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point there about you're doing editing already in Google Docs and you're doing some formatting there. And then when you bring it into Drupal, what do we always say when we're talking to content publishers in Drupal? Typically, we're asking them to paste their content in as plain text and format
Mm-hmm.
it in the CK editor or format it directly there. So now you're duplicating that effort.
Yeah.
If you can take that process out, that saves everyone time and all the review process you just described doesn't get lost in translation as it moves up into the site.
We do have a question in the chat. Is this product feature inspired by similar features in other CMSs, WordPress, AEM? Um, I think that you can't have something like this that lives in a vacuum, right? Like, um, and I think that there have been attempts at doing similar kinds of things, but and I can't speak exactly to like the original Inception idea, which is about 2-ish years old. That this has been sort of like went from like a thought in someone's head to a thing that we're putting out in the world. But obviously, like yeah, it's there's a lot of influences and there's a lot of use cases, and I will also point out that this isn't necessarily a one size fits all, and we don't want it
Mhm.
to be, right? Like there are going to be times when like the story that I told earlier was that like begging and pleading people to use the Gutenberg editor. There are going to be times when you still want people to use Gutenberg to do page layouts or to do something else to lay out a page, and that's fine. But for things that are super content heavy or where you are doing the editing in Google Docs, that's sort of like where this slots in. Um, and yeah, like WordPress doesn't have live editing yet. And will it have live editing? I don't know, maybe someday. But it is a thing that like Google Docs has been doing for a very, very long time. Other things have been doing their things for a very long time. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can just use the tools that are good at the things that they're doing. And I see our product owner, Roland, pointing out in the chat, yes, source of inspiration, not necessarily inspired by this CMS.
Yeah, and the CMS experience, like what this offers as well is you don't have to completely rethink your entire architecture. You don't have to rethink everything that you've done and go into a full redesign and rebuild from the ground up. We can look at this as, how do I look at this as an additive approach? Where can I make life easier for my editors and for the people using my site so that we can focus our efforts on new iterations, different things going forward, more of what we're trying to target for our audiences versus the technical pieces that get in the way of producing the content.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, like there's a React or GraphQL layer in the middle, so like you can do any sort of thing on the like it doesn't have to be limited to one of these circles even. Like you can do whatever on the input and do whatever on the output and use it in ways that we haven't even conceived of yet. And that's the developer part of my brain gets excited about that.
It's that open source excitement. What does everyone do with the thing that you launch? How does
Right.
that happen? Well, here's the vision
How do I
now.
break this?
Yeah, what happens next?
Um, let's see. Roland says most CMSs are made with the perspective of bringing the editorial user into the CMS. Content publisher is built with the idea of meeting the editorial user where they like to work. Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. All right. Final thoughts. Do you have other things that you're thinking about or looking for, or that you see in your role as a sales engineer at Pantheon, where you see opportunities to bring this into the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, like we were saying earlier, and like Roland just mentioned in the chat as well, is bringing the editorial user where they're already working. That's an exciting place, and it doesn't fit every single experience and every single opportunity, but there's a lot of places where you need to get some different governance approaches. You need to have users bringing content in, and you're taking out those barriers to get them getting their content up to the website much, much faster, or even to not a website, to an application layer if we're thinking about the Next.js side of the equation. So that's an exciting thing. And how do we start to look at that and move it forward? And this is just launching in public preview this week or last week. And excited to see how that continues to grow and how, like you mentioned, Chris, the community and everyone starts to leverage this and what grows from that.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to seeing how people use the interaction layer with the API for new for different things that go beyond like the standard CMSs, like what we saw internally with React Bricks in implementation, and what we're doing with the documentation site that doesn't use any CMS at either end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that we'll cap it there. Good discussion. There is actually, I'll bring up my closing slide from Badcamp here because I've got some links that can be. I'll make this bigger. There's pantheon.io/platform/content publishers where you go to find information, sign up for the free trial, all that stuff. I wrote a blog post that a lot of the stuff that we talked about today sort of covers some of the stuff that I wrote about in the blog. And yeah, you can learn more about it in those places. Kevin, thanks you for coming on and talking about this and being the Drupal voice. We didn't have Steve to be the Drupal voice, so you were a good like stand-in.
Big shoes to fill in.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, thanks for everyone for watching live and anybody in the future that are coming back to look at this. And we'll see you on the internet.
And see Chris's Badcamp presentation coming up this week
Exactly.
as well.
Yep, tomorrow. All right. See y'all later.
Thanks, all.